Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we, a business owner and an artist, discuss the business of art and the art of business. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made.
And I'm Ross, creative director at Epic Made. And we're the hosts of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include Matt Vojak of Made by Things, Jared Beasley of Astoria, and Carrie Ann King of Illuminate Labs.
We are forever grateful for the supporters of our podcast, and we are always looking for more sponsors. That said, Pixel Retentive is brought to you by the creative gurus at Epic Made. Epic Made is a team of strategists and artists who excel in visual storytelling. Our studio crafts unforgettable animation and illustration, and that not only captivates your audience, but also drives tangible business results. We specialize in engaging imaginative, pop culture savvy audiences with beloved clients like Nickelodeon, WWE, and sci-fi. Visit getepicmade.com and let's collaborate on your next creative campaign.
You did that pretty well for being gone for 2 weeks. Today with us, we have Liam Martin. Liam is the co-founder and chief innovation officer of Time Doctor, and he's a leading expert in asynchronous management and remote work. As a passionate advocate for remote-first cultures, his insights have been featured in Forbes and TechCrunch, co-organizer of Running Remote Conference, and author of bestseller Running Remote. Liam helps businesses unlock the potential of flexible, location-independent teams. Welcome, Liam.
Thanks for having me, Ross and Carl. I am very excited, and that was a great rundown of me. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. And the big secret is that I think we actually just redid all of my press kit, and it was all done through ChatGPT 4.0.
Oh yeah.
So you made it even better by adding a human touch.
I am hoping that all of our work can be better than ChatGPT 4, and that way forever. But who knows? We'll see when you get to super AI or whatever the next phase is called. Who knows?
Just use your manners so that when they take over, they can pull your records and see that you were polite.
You were nice to them, yeah.
I always do say please to any ChatGPT, like AI model. Oh, could you please do XYZ?
Oh,
and I agree with you, Carl. Because remember, it's okay. Let's just think about this. It's 2045, right? ChatGPT 7.0 has his laser gun pointed at your head, and then he processes and he thinks, "Oh, you said please and thank you. I'll only, shoot your balls off as an example, so you can't procreate." Go along. That's what you want to be able to have, right? You want to be able to make sure that you make it out to the other end. Because I don't know what this is not a podcast about AI, but I just thought
it's been more than I would.
Yeah, some general stuff that just came up yesterday. So it's December 12th today, and it's really playing with it all morning. So it's been interesting to kind of see that evolution as it kind of moves forward. But I did actually have a really interesting chat with a buddy of mine last week, and he is the chief data scientist of a multi-billion-dollar company that's really focusing on AI. And his theory is that AGI is nowhere close to being done. And everyone else that says that AGI is going to be done in the next 2 to 3 years is all full of shit.
Yeah, AGI, that's the next phase I was talking about.
Yeah, artificial general intelligence. So a superhuman, think of, HAL from Space Odyssey, that kind of a thing. Someone that can think and take their own actions on things and all that kind of stuff. Or what was that movie with the guy? He was it's the Pirates of the Caribbean actor, and he turned himself into an AI.
I don't remember Descendants.
Yeah, Descendants, right? It's
so good.
That is a really cool AI movie, but he said that could be next year or it could be 50 years from now. He said, we really don't know because it's as much of a jump as the discovery of LLMs were back in 2022. And he said, like, it's not one of those things that you can just pour money in one end and actually get a result out the other. It's one of these just innovative discoveries that you have to figure out. So I'm pretty bearish on humans for the next couple decades.
We'll be all right for a while. There's like 3 phases after AGI. There's artificial super intelligence, and like there's like 3 other like iterations of artificial intelligence even after general intelligence. It gets real crazy. It gets to like divinity level consciousness.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that like this is seeded in our DNA, that we were just going to create this eventually, and this is like an intergalactic space traveling consciousness, and this is how it summons itself to each new planet it seeds with random mitochondrial DNA asteroids. I don't know.
He's been smoking a lot since his knee surgery, so.
All right, so that was a fun little kickoff, but before we get into the weeds of stuff today, I do want to ask you our little intro question. So tell us how long you've been in the industry, in your industry, and the project you're most proud of so far.
Oof, I have been in remote work for almost 20 years. And I would say the thing that I'm most proud about is the running remote conference. So that was something that we started back in 2017 when remote work was not what it is today, right? No one knew it really existed.
Right.
And I took a chance, right? I have this philosophy of ready, fire, aim. So I just booked a venue and I said, okay, I booked this venue. It's 9 months in the future. I've put up a website that I took like a day to just hack together. And I said, could I get 5 or 6 of my friends to be able to come and speak at this conference? And they said yes. And then we had 250 people that showed up, which was fantastic. So that's the kind of thing that was really great. And it became such a important kind of community footprint for us because remote work was really, really small pre-COVID. Like no one really knows that pre-COVID, like a month before COVID started or really kind of blew up in March, 4.5% of the US workforce was working remotely.
Wow.
And by March, it was 67% of the US workforce was working remotely. That's the biggest shift in work since the Industrial Revolution. But the Industrial Revolution took about 80 years, and we did that in March. So it completely changed everything that we understand about work and how it interacts with all the other aspects of society. And I think we haven't even absorbed that as of right now, because we've just seen in the last couple of weeks, Elon and Vivek have got Doge, and they're going to try to push everyone back into the office that works for government agencies. You're seeing Amazon push everyone back to the office. So there's a big undertow, essentially, of this kind of pullback towards the office, and it's going to be really interesting to see where we're at in the next 12 months.
Yeah, and I think the thing that they're fighting against right now is people like us, right, who are, a higher level at companies or founder owners of companies. We've had a lot more freedom in our life and a lot more ability to build a work-life balance. And then suddenly 60% of the population had that, right? It's so much easier to organize your day when you don't have to fucking spend an hour driving in traffic and let alone like we're all men and, some of us spend more time on our appearance than others, but like, women for the most part are expected to get out of bed, 4 hours early and do their hair and do their makeup and do all this shit. So women in particular, like if they didn't have to be on video, like they got so much of their time back, right? Like, which is wild. So you don't even talk about some of that stuff, especially not, on the male side of this cultural experience, but like, it's crazy to even think about. And so now like these companies are having to fight that, like, oh, we need you to come into the office, and employees are rightfully asking why. Like, we don't care about your real estate value. Like, we want to have a nice life. Like, and that's really the big thing, right? They want to have more control, but I don't think that actually makes people more productive. And I know you have numbers and information on that, Liam, that like, is part of, all of your systems. So, but that's just my high level there.
I think the big thing is, you're absolutely right. So this morning I woke up at about 7:45. I took my 2 kids, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, to daycare. It's about a 15-minute walk, dropped them off. My daughter lost her elf. She has like a Christmas elf, and she lost it on the way. So I went to the store and I bought 2 more so that I have a backup, because I'm kind of screwing with her. Like I'm putting the elf in different places.
That elf on the shelf thing.
Yeah, and now she's scared of the elf, which I got to kind of like tone it down a little bit because yeah, I told her about Krampus last night and I probably shouldn't have done that. Anyways, so I was able to have like a really nice, productive morning where I got all of my social stuff finished, my family life finished, and then I'm plugged in and I started working about 9:30, did about half hour of email, and then I jumped on with you guys, right? And so just that work life balance integration, it's so much better when you're able to work remotely. And I think to your point, Carl, the reality is that it is about control fundamentally. I would probably say, I've asked a lot of the companies that are going back to the office because I deal with a lot of them inside of my work. And I constantly ask them why. And the first couple responses you'll always get is it's because of culture. It's because we work better when we're in one place and we're all working together. And then once you get past that, you got to really have a chat with them for like 45 minutes before that kind of just that's like the PR talk.
Yeah,
why
right.
everyone is going back to the office. It's because they don't know how to manage those people in a remote environment. They don't have the skills to be able to manage those team members. And it's a lot about transparency. It's a lot about accountability, to be completely honest with you. I was on a podcast or I was on a panel last week for another conference. And they asked me, like, what's one wish that you had with regards to remote work? And I said, and they all kind of like were a bit of aghast at this. I said, I would love to be able to try to convince Elon Musk that remote work is a good idea. Because it's like, if you convince that guy that remote work is a good idea, then you can actually expand out to everyone else. And the reality right now is that we've built up almost like a political divide between these two groups, which I never thought remote work would. It's like it's a non-political issue, but it's become a super political issue in the last few months. And so I'm realizing this next big stage for remote work, in order for remote work to really thrive, because it's not going away. That's the other thing that's everyone is just kind of not understanding at this point is we're at 67% at peak remote work. About a year and a half in after COVID, we went down to about 33%. And today, 2.5 years later, 3 years later, actually, we're at 31%. So went from 32 to 31% in the last 3 years. Like basically it's rock solid. It is not moving. That is our new baseline remote work. So from 4.5% to 30-ish%. And that's not going to change fundamentally. So there's going to be this conflict that continuously happens between employer and employee. But what I really want to kind of show them is that you just have to manage them differently. And if you just want to stick your head in the sand and say, hey, I want everyone back to the office, I'm not going to manage them this way, you're going to fail.
Yeah. Well, it's part of the culture now, right? Go ahead, Rob.
No, I mean, I think that if no one listening has guessed up to this point, the topic is about remote work. But the episode's going to be about remote work. But I mean, we've been doing, Carl and I have been doing, have been running this business remotely almost exclusively since I've joined 12 years ago, right? And there have been stints of like, oh, well, we need an office for culture's sake, we need an office for presentation's sake, right? And so Carl spent some money having an office in Norfolk to just basically to just take meetings at, right? Like the overall group didn't conjugate there every day.
Maybe once a month.
Like,
yeah.
Right. Even that, it turned into such a burden to go to the office that like when COVID hit, we were just like, screw it. It doesn't make any sense to do this anymore. And the rest of the world figured out what a fucking video call was. So we didn't need to, right? We didn't need to go back. And it's allowed us to expand our team beyond this country, beyond the state, right? It's allowed us, like I work with artists in England, in India, in on the West Coast, in Pennsylvania, right? Like, and so like, and they're incredibly talented, important members of the team. Like, there's only a few local people. And so while I do agree that there's some of the PR answer is right? There are instances, especially when we're like in grind mode doing animation or something like that, where it's like, if we were all in one room, this would get done faster. It's just a fact, right? But I wouldn't trade that for all of the other benefits that everybody is enjoying. Like one of our lead 2D animator, Gabby, like she has a dog that she takes out at 1 o'clock every day, and so I know not to schedule a meeting with her at 1 o'clock. But she has to put her dog at daycare or something like that. Like she has to send money to be able to deal with that, or deal with like a mess when she comes home every day. Like it just isn't, and that's just one minor domino.
Yeah. Let's start talking about kids and relationships. Like you have lunch with your wife every day at noon. That wouldn't happen if I forced you to go into an office, right? And I think there's a part of it too that's like some people can't do this, right? Some people need the clear separation. We've hired people in the past before remote work was, like you said, before it was cool. We've done this for years. We used to just have an office for the sake of like, we're a real business and like, whatever. But like when we stopped doing local small business, we started really expanding and working with clients that, could really benefit the most from our level of skill. Like it stopped being it's not being important at all in terms of what if we had an office. And I was like, why am I wasting thousands of dollars a month? But circling that back, like some people need the structure and the separation, and they actually need someone to go, here's your A to Z list of XYZ to do, and we're gonna breathe down your neck doing it. Like it feels weird, and I definitely don't think that that's the vibe in creative environments, right? Like, but I think like Ross said, there is something there to be said about, could we do this faster in person? Maybe. But like, I think that, what you're going to say, Liam, and like what you've seen is that you can develop systems and processes to mitigate a lot of that. And there's a lot of great technology. And like, there are times where we just get on Zoom calls and work together on things like we would in an office, right? So I think, but the cultural value of saying like, hey, we value your life and your free time and that balance. Like, I think that that's way more important. I think the bigger the corporations are, the more everybody on the team is a number on a spreadsheet, and the less they can afford to really give a shit about like the work-life balance and how much they care about this individual employee, because they'll just replace them next week. And I left corporate America because of that in 2007, right? Because I hated that thing. Like I just didn't, that feeling felt yucky to me, just in general. So
I have a funny remote work story before we get into that. So in 2011, talking about like needing a place to an office, we could not get a merchant account without actually having a US address, because we're a US corporation, but I'm Canadian and my business partner is Australian. So we didn't actually have a location. We ended up getting a space that's probably the size of maybe like 4 telephone booths.
Nice.
That is like a little office in Las Vegas, and we still have it. And the issue is that we have to process mail in that space. So we literally hire a dude to show up there once a week, and he grabs all the mail that goes through the mail slot, and then he scans it on a scanner that we've set up there, and then we get it digitally. It's so wild. And I remember thinking like, why do we need a physical address? Like, this is so stupid. And you just couldn't get a merchant account. You couldn't get a credit card processing account without actually having a physical address, a physical US address. And particularly because we were both foreigners, we weren't US citizens, it's even more complicated to be able to do that. And it was such a wild experience. And we now have it. And I've been to it once. And I remember it was just sort of like, looked at this place and I was like, oh my God, this is just, it was almost like looking at like a I don't know, like a 3 and 6 computer or something like that. I was just like, this is such a stupid idea.
Yes.
You have to pay for this stupid little box to be able to receive mail and scan it. And the other thing that was wild too is we now have this really fancy scanning machine in that room that takes up like half the room. So he just like feeds the mail in the front end, and then it opens it or something like that and scans it automatically. The thing costs like $8,000 or something like that. It was just like, it's absolutely wild that we have this stupid machine doing it. Anyways, what I was getting back to is where, remote work right now, like if anyone says, oh, I can't do remote work, I can't work remotely, where have you been in the last like 12 years, because there's an entire community of people that have been doing this very, very successfully. WordPress, as an example, runs 38% of the internet, completely remote. They have no offices, right? It's just like they run 38% of the internet. They're pretty good at their job, right? They know what they're doing. And not only that, the other thing that's wild is they are what's called an asynchronous organization. So they don't meet in person synchronously the vast majority of the time. And a very, very small amount of, we're communicating synchronously right now on this podcast. But if you're listening to this or watching this, you're consuming that information asynchronously. So when it's most opportunistic for you, you can consume that information. That's the way that our business generally operates. So we produce content. We have really cool edited videos. We actually have like a video editor just for our internal company that edits content and we try to make them as wild as we possibly can so that people are excited about it. We kind of see our own employees as customers. So the executive team sees our employees as customers, and then you would want to be able to produce as amazing as you possibly can content for that community. So you create really cool content, and then they consume it, and they like it, and they want more of it. And so that's the way that we operate, and it just creates an environment where everyone inside of the organization, we're in 47 different countries right now, can consume that information when it's most opportunistic for them. So they're not stuck at 3:00 in the morning doing a Zoom call, as an example, or the company update, when it's like, no, I could actually just go do that later on, right? Like I could go catch that recording in the morning. And then we also, just for company updates, we have two company updates. So we have one that's at like 8 a.m. my time and 8 p.m. in the other time zone, so that you can catch one or the other. Or if you don't want to catch either and just get a recording, totally cool. It's up to you. Just giving that employee the freedom to be able to do what they want to do. And it all feeds back into, I wrote this book about 2 years ago called Running Remote, which is the same name as the conference. So the book and the conference are essentially the same thing. And a guy that is a good friend of mine, I've known him for 20 years, is a guy named Cal Newport. And he wrote this book called Deep Work, and he wrote the byline for our book. And deep work is this concept that if you have everything available for you to be able to accomplish a very difficult task, and you can just shut everything down and execute on it, that is the optimal state that every single employee or every single person should be in order to be able to do their best work. So asynchronous management really kind of just facilitates that. Like, I'm sure that you guys sit down and you do a collaboration meeting saying, okay, this is how we're going to do it. Let's divide out tasks across the organization and who's going to do what and when are those things all going to be due. And then you might even put it into a project management system, and it's just, okay, cool, break. And you guys all go and execute on your separate things. That's the key to really successful businesses long-term. And a lot of managers just don't want to be able to manage that way, because the big secret is that most asynchronous organizations have a managerial layer that's about 50% thinner than their synchronous on-premise counterparts.
This new one person can organize one person can organize 100 employees significantly easier than in person, right? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm just looking at the outputs, right? I'm like, so you're supposed to do this design edit by 3 days from now, and that's when you owe it to me, right? And you know that you have that commitment, and I know that you have that commitment.
Right.
So I'm just going to wait for that to happen in 3 days. And if it doesn't, then I'll email you about it. Or more specifically, the project management system actually emails you and says, hey, where's the report, or where's this edit? It was supposed to be done 3 days, it's supposed to be due today. That kind of a thing. Like, that's basically the way that asynchronous orgs work. And the part that I find so frustrating is when you actually look at what managers do, the vast majority of the time, it's basically just them kind of treating employees like children, and you should really just be treating them like adults. It's like, do your job. If you don't do your job, we won't continue to hire you. Let's just be completely clear about that. Like, you need to do your job, right? But the reality is that if you've committed to do X by this point, I'm not going to bother you until you delivered X. That's it, right? It's just like, and it's such a simple concept, but the vast majority of corporate America doesn't abide by that, which is super frustrating.
Because they want to own people and possess it, right? Yeah, and it's the thing. Like,
I think that there's a degree of there's a massive lack of trust that, let's say, a more traditional corporation has with their employees. I mean, my wife used to work for Geico prior to being a stay-at-home mom. And they monitored like when she went to the bathroom. Like, we're talking about like a level of scrutiny that is absolutely unnecessary for competent adults, right? And I think that a heavy majority of people who work for any corporation are competent enough to get their work done and, go to the bathroom on their own time. Now, when COVID happened, my wife did have to transition to working from home temporarily. And it was, I don't want to discount the fact that, like, for businesses, it's a no-brainer. For internal, like, employees, it was a bit of an adjustment for her because there's a level of responsibility placed on you now that, like, there's a level of temptation placed on you, I guess.
Yes.
That, like, you can convince yourself. There's a book. I can't think of what it's called. It's called The War of Art. I can't think of who it's by. Correct. Instead of The Art of War. The War of Art. And the author, I'll look up in a second when someone else is talking. But the author talks about this concept called resistance. And that's basically what the whole book is about. It's the idea of battling what he calls resistance. It's this idea that there's this force that we want to... Stephen Pressfield. There you go, Carl. There's this force that wants you to fail. And a lot of the time it's internal and it's made up of excuses that you can justify, right? Like, the external stuff, a lot of the time you identify as a problem, right? Like, oh, I shouldn't be watching Netflix right now. I should be working. But it's the internal stuff like, oh, well, I'm starving. I would do better work if I just made food. Or I'm, my dog needs to go for a walk now, right? As opposed to later, because really I don't actually want to be at my computer desk, right? So, like, there are these internal excuses that can be justified that I think people have to kind of like work through when they're first learning how to do remote work. And I think that when you become used to that, you can kind of prioritize your day or prioritize your schedule in a way that, like, you can get all of this stuff done without being reactionary. And I think that's the big problem, right? It's a reactionary issue when you're first starting out as an employee. You don't really know what's priority anymore because you're not locked in at work.
Yeah. I think that ties into just like setting the right expectations and company culture. Like, you get used to that as you experience it.
Yeah.
But like when I hire people, and I'm sure I said this to you, Ross, back then, but maybe I hadn't polished it quite yet. But like, I tell people like we don't do any hand holding here, right? Like, we are a fully remote business. We bring you on to do a specific thing. We'll be very clear about that. So we'll give you objectives and we'll get timelines and budgets and expectations set. And then we get the fuck out of the way. And we expect you to do what you said you're going to do and communicate adequately with us, right? We have all our systems in Slack and Monday.com and all our project management and all that sort of stuff. But like, there's no hand holding. And some people like just don't fit in that mold because they're not used to that and they can't do what Ross was just talking about. And we've found that out, and you find out pretty quickly on those types of things. And it's really just a different type of work. And I think the people that can master this, and freelancers were already good at this for years, right? Like they were used to that. Like, so I think it's just worth really
everyone can do it, right? Like, I think everyone I think that's one of the things I don't want to be misinterpreted on it. Like, I think everyone can do remote work. I think there's a level of education involved in being able to efficiently remote work compared to the standard efficiency that everyone expects out of being in an office, right? You don't have to learn how to be in an office and do your job. I think you kind of have to learn how to be at home in your bedroom with a laptop and do your job. Oh, this, but you know what I mean?
I think there's a myth out there for office efficiency too. I don't think anyone was ever as efficient at the office as like we like to pretend. There's all kinds of bullshitting and wasting time, but if you're in the office, you're doing your job, so you feel okay with it. But I didn't mean to cut you off, Lee.
Well, one of the points, Carl, that you made was temptation, and there is less temptation in the office.
Right.
There's less temptation, right? Because there's a manager walking behind you, and it's like, okay, you can't watch, Netflix on your secondary monitor while you're actually doing whatever else.
Yeah.
And
No
I
Breaking
think
Bad binges.
that's it. When I look at procrastination,
Yeah.
I see procrastination as I can win each battle, but I can never win the war.
Mhm.
So, like, when you think about procrastination, it's like, okay, I gotta get this report finished in time. If I don't get this report finished in time, I'm screwed, right? Like, or I'm gonna let other people down. And you fight that procrastination. You fought that battle. But then tomorrow, there's another battle to fight, right? It's like, it's always going to be there. It's like the Hydra. It's always got another head that picks up. And so for me, what I'm really focused on is making myself accountable as much as humanly possible. So how do I want to be able to show up for other team members inside of the organization? And do I give out as much as I am expecting from others fundamentally? And that's also kind of a weird management thing, because at this point, and I was talking to Carl about this in the pre-interview, I'm now the managers of managers. So it's kind of like sometimes if I go into a meeting, for years, I felt so guilty about not having a task.
Mhm.
Like, you go into a meeting with 8 people and it's like, okay, so you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to da, 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 and I'm going to watch it
Yeah, right.
happen. Right. And it's like, oh, well, that's bullshit. That's not a real job. But it actually is. Like, you do need to be able to facilitate all these things to make sure that they're moving in the right direction. It's just that in corporate America, that's like so much more. There's so much more of that capacity in an asynchronous office environment as opposed to an asynchronous environment. Because for me, it's just like, you've made a commitment. We have a company value called self-guided missile. And so we really kind of flush out everything that we think about in our business, from our mission, vision, values, and what we want to be able to achieve in the world and the values that we have. And so one of our big one is self-guided missile, which is, here's the target. I click the button. You're like a heat-seeking missile, and you figure out how to get there. I don't know how you're going to get there, but you know what the target is. And you might have tried like 17 different things to be able to get to that particular target. Because a lot of the times these things are completely, like, particularly at my work, it's always creative. Like, whenever we're presented with a problem, it's always a unique problem.
Yep.
That's why I agree. I have like this, we got hit really bad by the recent Google search algorithm update. We basically lost like 25% of our traffic in a 3-month period, and it really kicked us in the teeth. And I have been trying like 80 different things with my team to be able to try to get back to this target. And we did. And we figured out this huge SEO hack to be able to get us back to where we were before. But if we were just like, oh, there's a playbook that you have to follow, no way. We would have never gotten there, right? It's, again, being that self-guided missile, being the person that just figures out, like, my job is to figure out how to get there, and your job is to tell me what the target is.
Yep. And what does and doesn't work along the way, right? And like provide information.
Here's what we've tried before. All of these 78 things didn't work, and your job is to try another 78 different things.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's applying that scientific method, right? Like, that's like, hey, we have this hypothesis. These are the variables we're aware of. We're going to isolate these and change these out and guess and check, and we'll get there, right? And you never know. Like, sometimes you just come up with a crazy ass idea. You try a thing and that works, and then you try to break it down. Why did that work, right? So,
but yeah, I mean, read The War of Art. CM Pressfield, not sponsored. But it's a lot of it is that, like, get up. Every day you're gonna have to fight that other Hydra head, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of the book addresses it's like it's sort of a motivational book, but he's kind of like he's a little bit more aggressive about it, I think, in a way that I listened to the author through audiobook, but um I'm a big fan of how like factual he made it all, how like blunt, I guess. I'm from New Jersey, so my whole family is a little bit more blunt. The whole honesty without sugarcoating thing. But all right. No, I mean I think it's a huge benefit if you can get past, as he puts it, resistance, right? If you could get past this idea that, you know, you have all of these things at your disposal, but you have a job to do, and so you do your job as opposed to all of these other things that you could be doing. And you take advantage of the time where you don't actually have something sitting on your desk to go make yourself an extra cup of coffee or to go hang out with your kid or to go buy another elf from the Dollar Tree, right? And so I think that you just don't have that opportunity if you're working synchronously, right? Like it's not an option at all. So you're removing these freedoms when in reality we should be fostering responsibility. I think that corporate America needs to eventually learn that, but I think that there's so many people who they're kind of comfortable clocking in and not doing their job that like there might be a place for an office every time just to force that style of work to keep churning. I don't know. I don't know if everybody could eventually work with
That's the way the majority of the market is moving right now. So the majority of market is what I would call as hybrid. So they spend some time in the office, they spend some time working from home. And there's a huge variability in that. So, you know, there might be like, you might spend 2 days in the office, you might spend 4 days in the office, you might spend one, right? It just depends on your particular situation. And one of the things that we found, which has been wild, in Amazon ordered everyone back to the office. And that's like 1.7 million people. They're the second largest employer in the United States. So I look at all these data sets like week over week and really kind of figure out, okay, did we drop 50 bips? Like what's going on? And the wild thing is not only did remote work not go down, it went up a little bit in that week and remained consistent. And so they started doing interviewing with these Amazon employees. And have you guys ever heard of this concept called coffee badging?
Mm-mm. No.
No? Okay. So basically what was happening is the manager of the employees was like, I know you guys work better when you work remotely and I don't want to have to deal with this shit. Give me your badges.
Oh shit.
And just go pop, 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 pop at the beginning of the day. And then you're at work, right? You're at work because they're checking those badges. They're checking those blips. Another term is called hushed hybrid, which is basically just saying like, listen, you guys have got to come in from time to time. You know, like the big boss has got to see you from time to time, but I know that this is BS. You guys can work from home, but when I call you in, you guys got to come in. Are we cool? Cool. And so when you look at these numbers, it's wild. The best one that I love is Castle Systems Back to Work Index, and it's a commercial real estate company that runs this index. So you know that it's really fair because they're actually they want this number to go down, but the data shows the complete opposite. And they're at about 50.5% from pre-COVID levels. From like peak of COVID. So peak of COVID, they define as 100%. You know, in office, people are not going back to the office. So people have only transitioned back about 50% from where they were before. And so it's kind of wild it's so wild to be able to see this data. And again, that has been locked solid for the past 3 years, hasn't moved more than, 1%.
Well, like you said, it went from 60% of the workforce to 30%, and that's a 50% drop from peak COVID, right? So, I mean, all those numbers line up perfectly.
Those numbers, and the thing that I find so frustrating is when you look at the news and the media, everyone's talking about how the office has got to come back and everyone's going back to the office. And it is not true. Like every single data set that I see shows that none of that is true. It's been absolutely solid and it's not moving. And not only that, 86% of brand new businesses are being started remotely.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
The beautiful part that's like the new businesses are like, why would we pay for an office? That's so stupid. Let's just do everything remotely.
Yeah, like you're trying.
Yeah,
every
it's like
penny counts, right? Like you're not gonna waste money on some vanity shit.
no, that's exactly it. It's just like, let's go and build a business and make sure that we make a ton of money at that particular business or survive, right? So it's so exciting to be able to see this. I think that we're going to have, there's an academic from Stanford named Nick Bloom. He's coming to the next Running Remote that's going to be happening end of April in Austin, Texas, by the way, if anyone's interested. And that one, he has this concept of the Nike swoosh back to remote work. So we had this huge drop off from COVID where everyone started going back to the office. We're now in that kind of, maybe we're going up 1%, maybe we're going down 1%, but he thinks that we're going to see a slow 2 to 5% year over year increase in remote work over the next 10 years. And he thinks that we're going to be back at like 50% by the end of the decade, which I would probably say is a pretty good estimate. So if you're thinking right now, oh, we shouldn't be building anything for remote teams, now is actually the perfect time to be able to do it, because you're going to see that market increase 2.5% to 5% every single year over the next 10 years, which is going to be a very exciting time if you're building a remote first product.
It's also proven that the companies, corporations, businesses that are all interested in pursuing a more like employee sustainable or culture sustainable sort of remote work environment where we actually give a shit about the people that we employ, like those businesses are immediately more competitive, even if they can't offer as much money than like a Geico, who is basically saying, yeah, this is just kind of how it is. You're going to come to the office. We're going to monitor your bathroom breaks, et cetera, right? Like you start to weigh more than just salary when choosing how you're going to work and who you're going to work for and whatnot. Like it's significantly more complex now to find a job that fits you, as opposed to just, oh, well, I don't want to work in a factory. I'd rather work in an office. Like that's industrial revolution caliber choices. We're so much farther ahead than that now. And with the dawn of social media being a viable business practice, again, it's one of those things. It's like, why would you, unless you need a production studio, why would you like a physical space to film stuff? Why would you ever spend the money on an office?
And you see it.
Agree.
You see it now too. It's like, hey, we offer 401k matching, 3 weeks of vacation, hybrid work opportunities. Like it's on the list of perks for the job, right? Like because people know how valuable it is. So I think you're absolutely right. Like if I'm looking for a job and I got offered like comparable everything in this job, like culture, all the stuff seems great, but this one lets me work from home even 1 day a week, like I'm taking that one every time. It's a better opportunity for me, right? So like there's that to your buddy's point.
There was a large survey from a social media company that is, I can't seem to remember their name right now, but name escapes me. There was a large study that was done, interviewed about 5,000 employees and asked them and they're all people that currently work remotely, how much of a pay cut would you take to keep your job? So everyone's going back to the office, right? Like how much of a pay cut would you take? And the average was 22%.
Yep.
So it's like, it's pretty interesting to be able to see that, right? It's like, if you are and I'm just talking to the business owners right here, guys, hire remote teams. They're more productive. Every single study, by the way, shows that they're more productive. And you could actually pay them 20% less and they would still be in your work for your company as opposed to another company. An extra 20% net profit is pretty awesome, right? To be able to run a business like that, and everyone's stoked and everyone's happy about it. I find it so frustrating. We had an engineer that ended up working for us, and he got 11th place in the Facebook hackathon. So they run like a yearly hackathon to find talent. This guy got 10th or 11th place. And he got an offer from Facebook. He got an offer from Google. And he worked with us for a third of the salary because he got to stay in India with his family. And he lives in a small town of like 5,000 people in India. And he's making like the third that we're paying him. He's probably the richest guy in his town.
Yeah.
It's like, which is just like, he's stoked, right? But it's like, he gets to just live a life that is so incredibly rewarding, where he gets to be with his parents and his wife's parents and all this kind of stuff. And to me, that is the reality of the future of work, is the ability to be able to do your best work regardless of wherever you're located.
Oh yeah, 100%.
100%. 100%. I had a similar experience. We were looking for artists for a big NFT project we did last year. And I was trying to find somebody here locally in the States, and I just could not find anybody. And it wasn't the budget. It was just like the ask and what we needed and the timelines and all that. And I found a guy in Indonesia through a Facebook group. And, when I told him what we were going to pay him a month, he said, oh, I can't take that. Like, that's way too much money. And I was like, dude, this is what it's worth to me. Like, you're the most qualified person I can find right now. Like, take care of your whole damn family. Live like a king. I don't care. Like, that just made me feel even more good about the salary and the fact that, like, I was like, look, everyone on my team could get up and move to Indonesia right now and live like kings on the same salary, but we're not going to do that because we don't want to, because our families are here and whatever our reasons are. I said, so like, I feel better about not exploiting your labor and just paying you what you're worth to me and my business and what I know I can make a profit on. And that just, it feels really good to take care of people. And, the disparity in cost of living is like wild. But I think as we are becoming more global and even cryptocurrency is so accessible to everyone with the internet, like, I think we're going to see those numbers start to creep towards each other, right? Like, where it's not.
It's like, well, I think part of the 20% deficit comes from the like ghost expenses of working in an office, right? Like, you end up with a higher gas cost. What?
Curse.
Yeah, you have a city area. Yeah, there you go. Well, yeah, that alone, right? You end up with possibly even most likely a second car. You end up with a higher gas bill. Like, I refill my tank once a month. Yeah. Like a higher gas bill. You have to eat at the office. Most offices don't have internal cafeterias, and some of the ones that do, you still have to fucking pay for. So you end up with going out to eat for lunch every day, right? Regardless of whether that's McDonald's, which costs $80 fucking now anyway. But
it's crazy.
It's insane. To feed two people was $40 the last time I went there.
For food.
Yeah, for crab food, right? But you end up eating at McDonald's every month or every day for lunch, as opposed to making your own food, possibly even breakfast. You end up going to Starbucks every single morning instead of just making coffee at home. Like, there's so many of these costs that rack up for just doing your job at an office that it makes sense to take a pay cut, because you're just like, well, I don't have $400 in expenses, $500 in expenses that, like that are getting shaved off because I'm able to just kind of wake up and go to work.
Yeah. 100%.
But we are, I don't mean to end on a rant, but we are hitting time, and I want to be conscious of everybody's time. So before we wrap, I do have one last question for you, Liam.
Yeah.
If there's anyone or anything in your career that you'd like to shout out to the audience, we've already made a couple of different recommendations, from books to conventions, but maybe it's a valuable resource, a mentor, a favorite client, just something that our audience can look up outside of the scope of the conversation.
You know what? When you asked me that question a little while ago, I thought I would give you one that's a little bit different. So there's a lot of different things I could talk about. The Running Remote conference, which if you want to go check it out. You can go and pick up the book, all that kind of stuff. But here's my new favorite guy. His name's Mark Ma. He is a assistant professor of accounting at the University of Pittsburgh. And he is a remote work just juggernaut. This guy has been pumping out studies left, right, and center. And he just came out with a really, really cool study this week that I've been loving. And I read it from cover to cover. And I usually am like, when I say I've read a study,
Yeah, right.
I I read the first page and then I go directly to the findings, or I toss it into like Google Gemini and I get it to give me like the breakdown of what it's supposed to do. But I read this cover to cover, and he did a multi-year analysis of Fortune 500 companies, S&P 500 companies that returned to the office and identified the biggest predictors of them returning to the office. Do you know what the number one predictor was of a S&P 500 company announcing a return to office mandate?
How much commercial real estate they own?
That's pretty darn close. And Carl, that's a good one, but no, it was something even simpler than that. Ross, I'll give you one. You give me your best guess, and then I can give it to you.
Okay. All right. I think it's got to be something stupid, like the cost of like ID badges or something like that. Like it's got to be something. It's got to be something really dumb. That's like, oh well, we've already bought 500 million plastic straws or something.
The number of middle managers.
So it is a stupid one. It's not that, however. Here it is. It is an 86% chance that they're going to announce a return to office mandate if their stock price drops more than 22%.
Oh, interesting.
So it is entirely, and all of these RTO mandates were actually announced during investor calls. Because if you're a publicly traded company, you need to do investor calls every single quarter. And these people are like, hey, what's going on? Like, I thought that, is it due to remote work that your stock price is going down?
It's all just,
no, and then they're like, let's throw remote work under the bus. This is perfect. Boom. Yeah, we're returning to the office, guys. That'll boost the stock price. And it hasn't worked for any of those companies. And the ones that are successful, two of the biggest ones that have retained their remote work status, Apple, which is the second largest company in the world by value, and NVIDIA, which has now become the most valuable company in the world. NVIDIA is remote. Like, no one knows this, right? It's like the biggest companies in the world that are super successful, they're all staying remote. The ones whose stock price are going down, they're all returning to the office. So Mark lays all of that out. Mark Ma, professor of business administration, University of Pittsburgh. Google him. His studies are awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. I love that. Awesome. Well, big thank you, by the way, to Fadi Bolos, CEO of Supportful, who connected us with Liam. So shout out to Fadi, previous guest. You can check out his episode. It was a couple before this. Just scroll through the index there.
Sounds good, man. And so we have been talking with Liam Martin, who is the co-founder and chief innovation officer of Time Doctor, and I guess you'd call he's the founder of Running Remote as well.
Sure, whatever you guys call me.
So,
yeah, I'm the guy that pays for it.
Benefactor of.
I like that term, of the benefactor.
Synonyms for the win. But you can check out their websites at timedoctor.com and runningremote.com. But if listeners want to follow up with you directly, where should they go, Liam?
LinkedIn is a good spot. And then also a YouTube channel, youtube.com/runningremote. All of our talks are up there for free. So if you can't afford to come to the conference, just check them out all there.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. All right, Liam. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll see you next time, everybody.
Yep. Peace.
We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.